Hello and welcome to the Level 3 Diploma for the Business Administrator, 347303. We're going to be focusing on Unit 306, which is Project Management. Within this short video, we're going to be focusing purely on outcome number 1, and it's one of 3. So each outcome is related to the overall delivery of a project. Step 1, or outcome number 1, is all about the undertaking of the planning of the project. So as you'd expect with any project, the planning phase is crucial. What I've done is I've split it into 6 different areas, and completion of each of these areas will help you meet the requirements and standards for outcome number 1 itself. So step 1 at the top left here is all about your project. And essentially what your project needs to be about is an improvement on a process that you're currently doing in your current role. You may already have an idea of something, or it might be something that you've recently done, but you need to think, if it is something that's already changed, how can you then adapt it and process it again and go take it on a bit further. If you're struggling to think of an improvement on a process, this is not an issue. Because you can speak to your line manager, to your managers, even your assessor if they understand your business well, and then you can decide together an actual improvement that you can look to create and help improve your business as a whole. So once you've decided your idea or spoken to your line manager and actually created it, you can then look at the next step, which is research. So for outcome number 1, it's important that you're able to prove the research you have done. So part of that might have actually been through the initial discussion that you've had with your line manager, for example. One thing that I recommend though is if you are going to demonstrate your knowledge of research via a conversation, it's important that you record it, and I'll give you some tips towards the end of the video about how you'd go about recording it. Another example of research could be through using the internet. And you could quite simply copy and paste an image of your search history, or it could be key slides or key bits of information that you found on the internet. You could then put that onto a Word document, and you could title it Research for Outcome Number 1, and that helps the assessor see, and anyone else who picks it up, just the sort of effort and the time that you've put in to actually research on your chosen project. Your third step is all about creating an outline plan, including the resources that are required. I've put outline in capitals because it quite literally is an outline, so we're not looking for a huge amount of depth here. But one thing you could do is put some very basic details in, i.e. how long you're going to give yourself to actually create this target that you've met. So it could be 1 month, could be 3 months, however long you think is required. And also to include what resources are required. So you need to think about what facilities you might need, is there any particular equipment, and what staff need to be involved. So that's step 3. The next part of your project will be step 4, and it's all about consulting the stakeholders. Because as you know, we can't just go around creating procedures without getting the A-OK. So it's important that we consult our ideas before we actually implement them. Now, there's a bit of confusion with the definition of a stakeholder. Quite often people think it's just someone who's right at the very top and has all their money in the business, and it's not necessarily that. So the kind of definition of a stakeholder is anyone who has an interest in a company and can either affect or be affected by the business. So that leads into the next bit. You'll see underneath it's got internal and external, and primary and secondary stakeholders. So examples of internal stakeholders could be owners, it could be managers, it could be the employees because they are taking a wage or a salary from the business. Essentially people who have an interest and a care, so they tend to be internal, so people that you work with. Whereas external, that could be people like suppliers and the customers themselves, because they naturally have a stakeholder in the business. So in your case, it's more than likely that your stakeholder will not necessarily be the person at the very top, depending on your company size, but it might be your direct line manager. or someone that you can make a call in terms of implementing a procedure. Once you've consulted the stakeholder, your next step is to actually create the final plan. So as you'd imagine, the final plan is going to be a little bit more thorough than the outline plan you've created. And you have to use some what we call preferred resources, and you'll find in your full course you'll get a range with a list of different ideas which can help demonstrate your plan. So rather than, I've got an example there of a Gantt chart. So typically Gantt charts are used to break information into different areas and also put a time scale on them. So in an outline plan, you might have put this is only going to take 2 months, whereas in a Gantt chart, you might still keep to your 2 months, but you can break down every different aspect and actually clearly show when you look to achieve each element, and it helps structure. So you'll find within the full course, you'll get a bit more guidance about how to create a final plan before your project actually commences. Your final step is that once you've created this information and created a Gantt chart, you can then discuss this final plan with the key stakeholder who you originally dealt with in step 4. So those are the 6 steps which will help you work towards outcome number 1. Okay, so we've kind of spoken about each element now. One thing I want to show you is essentially what could it look like? What exactly am I going to create to be able to show you to my assessor? And once again, I've split it into 6. Now, when everyone does this, they're going to do it in different ways, which is the sort of beauty of all of this. But I've kind of shown like a generic example of what I might see from someone's completion of outcome number 1. So for step 1, you might actually have a short written introduction about your project. So talking about why you're doing it and how it will help improve. That would be the real basics. And that could be quite a short paragraph relatively, as long as it's precise. Naturally, if that is something that you've agreed with your stakeholder, which you have to do as part of the outcome anyway, make sure that both yourself and your line manager sign it and date it as well, just for authenticity. Secondly, I'd expect to see some sort of evidence of research. So like we said, it could be professional discussion. It could also just be screenshots of information that you found out. Thirdly, so creating an outline plan. So it could be a draft. This very well could be done by pencil on a piece of paper, and you've just scanned it and signed it and sent it in through OneFile. That's totally fine. The fourth bit is a statement or professional discussion with a stakeholder. So when you actually get around to discussing your idea properly with your stakeholder, once again, you could either write a statement to say that we've had this conversation and get both parties to sign it, or a step above and even better than that is you yourself creating a professional discussion, which shows the two of you or whoever's involved actually discussing the project itself. Fifth bit is a completed final copy essentially of the final plan using the select resources. So if you have decided to use a Gantt chart, then I don't want you just to talk about it, I actually want to see a completed Gantt chart. So just making sure it's nice and clear and transparent. And the final bit is a sort of professional discussion potentially, or just an overall sort of copy of the final plan. So with those 6 points, naturally you'll find out even more when you get full access to the course, but this is a heads up of exactly what is required as part of outcome 1 to help you get thinking towards this task. Yes, in terms of access to course, like I said, and it applies to every single course, the activities that are in there and handouts are not mandatory, but they are recommended because they are opportunities not only to work towards your off the job, but also to develop and expand your knowledge and just help with clarity. So a few things to remember during this task of outcome 1. With anything you ever produce, and this is relevant across the apprenticeship, ensure that it is signed by whoever's involved. So if it is yourself and your line manager, make sure you both name and sign it and date it, because we will list the witness testimonies and who's involved on your OneFile. If you have decided to be brave and go for a professional discussion, different ways of doing it, but I guess the easiest way now is actually doing it through a mobile phone. Now, to ensure the accuracy and the sort of validity of it, one thing I'd really recommend is as soon as you click the start button for recording, introduce yourself and your role, and then get the other member of the party to also, if there's just two, get them to introduce their name and their title as well. And that will just help the assessor in terms of clarity of who's participated and who has also contributed to what. Okay, and once you've completed that, you can then upload it as a file onto OneFile to be used as evidence. So the third step is clarity, which is quite a difficult thing to do sometimes, but with projects like this, so with the whole outcome, the idea of it really is that someone is able to pick up your entire piece of work and they can kind of see it from day dot until essentially the completion of the plan. So it needs to be clear, and someone needs to be able to pick it up and can clearly see your step-by-step process. The final thing, and like with all of these courses, is the journal entry itself. So there's lots of different things you'll be able to put on your OneFile here towards your off-the-job training. You can document a little bit about your project, and also who you've spoken with and how it's developed. And make sure you can put, and you can also put your time that's involved with it all as well. So thank you for hearing me out today. That is the conclusion of the video. Thank you very much.